How's it going, everybody? Welcome into the Skyline Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jack Hartman, joined as always by my good friend, my co-host from the West Coast, Nick Normand. Nick, how you doing today, man?
Doing well, doing well. Just soaking in that week after victory kind of scent of a Steelers win, and a really good Steelers win at that. Very, very pleased with my Steelers. They got a signature win. They're the only team that's beaten both the Colts and the Patriots this year in the AFC. And the AFC, they're the two best teams in the AFC record wise right now. And so I'm feeling really good about my Steelers. And this one was definitely a better win than when they beat the Patriots, in my opinion. So I'm just happy because after a couple weeks of losing to Joe Flacco and then getting whacked in the second half against the Packers and our defense looking dreadful, our defense looked good, and so I'm happy. Just setting a better tone for the week. Better tone for the week.
For sure. Yeah, I feel like the Patriots game, the Steelers didn't win, the Patriots lost, but the Steelers won. The Steelers won this game against the Colts for sure.
Definitely.
So yeah, cool. Well, hey, the NFL trade deadline was 2 days ago. Last year we recorded as it was crossing the threshold of the trade deadline. We were able to get live reaction from you of the Steelers making that last second trade. But anyway, we're doing it after the fact. All the trades have happened, been finalized. We're going to talk about the notable ones, and we're just going to get right into it, talking about the New York Jets offloading their two best defensive players at this trade deadline, signaling to a lot of people that they are going full rebuild. That they trust Aaron Glenn, right? You don't do this if you don't trust Aaron Glenn. You don't trust his process of it's going to take a couple years. Dan Campbell famously said when he showed up to the Lions, like, give me 3 years. I'm sure that Aaron Glenn said the same thing to the Jets, and they're like, okay. And so they trade first. They trade Sauce Gardner to the Colts, and then they trade Quinnen Williams to the Cowboys. So that said, before we get into the specifics of these two trades, some noticeable guys on the Jets that they did not trade. Brees Hall is one of them who will be leaving this offseason, and the Jets will be getting nothing for. I mean, it's just the
Okay.
writing is on the wall. Like he was posting like emojis like that he was probably going to get traded too. It didn't happen. This is the final year. I don't think he has shown you enough production that they're going to franchise tag him. Like that would be surprising to me. So they don't trade him. They also, and while I would have been surprised if they had traded this guy, they did trade Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams. So nothing really is that surprising in that case. They did not trade Garrett Wilson, which I thought if you're going to trade Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams, you have to be considering trading Garrett Wilson as well. They do not trade him, so they do hold on to him. But the Jets do make some massive moves, some massive selling moves here. One of them I think is very consequential to the remainder of this NFL season. The other one I think is not consequential to the remainder of this NFL season, and we'll get to those. But Nick, first, let's just talk macro level about the Jets. Funny enough, this actually makes me feel more confident, and the Jets are actually, for the first time, it feels like in our lifetimes, have a direction that they're going in as a franchise, despite giving up two cornerstones of their team. I feel like the Jets have been in this purgatory that they're in because they only try to do these soft rebuilds. Even when they fire a coach, even when they draft a quarterback, with a top five pick, it's still like, well, we're gonna bring them in, and we have this roster that we feel pretty good about. Here's a couple star players here and there, and we're just gonna add them into it. And oh man, it doesn't work. This to me shows they're like, no, you know what? We need to full reset. We have a coach that we like. Aaron Glenn, the Jets finally win their first game. With him as the head coach. We have what we like, or and we need to and we need to get rid of some things so we can accumulate what we need to really progress forward.
Mhm. I agree that I like that this kind of shows a plan with the Jets. That definitely is evident to me. Where Aaron Glenn is a defensive mind. That's where he cut his teeth in Detroit. focusing on the defense, and he traded away two defenders. That doesn't evidence itself to me thinking this defense is going to be bad necessarily. The defense wasn't good this year. Defense wasn't good, but they traded away two players and got picks. And normally, when coaches do that, it's because they're wanting to get in their guys who fit their scheme to set up their culture. And I think this really helps shape what they want the team to look like next year because they're in the catbird seat to get the number one pick and to be able to draft the top quarterback. Right now, they kept in place Brees Hall, they kept in place Garrett Wilson. The offensive lines actually looked pretty good, I think, where they drafted tackle well. Interior offensive line's been good. And so I've been really, really impressed with the offensive personnel overall this season in a lot of ways, which is a really weird thing to say about a one-win team. But I think the personnel on the offensive side has a floor right now that's actually much higher than any time they've ever drafted a quarterback in recent years. Sam Darnold was coming in, and it was terrible players around him on offense. It was Robbie Chosen and nobody else. Old Le'Veon Bell who did nothing. And then Zach Wilson, like him and Garrett Wilson overlapped a decent bit, but like the offensive lines were dreadful. The run games weren't good. Like it was just kind of a mess. And I like that I feel like a good offensive line and good receivers or a good receiver, that kind of gives a floor to what the offense will be next year when they're trying to build it around a young quarterback and all the draft capital to be able to build out a defense that Aaron Glenn wants to build out. I also like that it's kind of substance over flash, which is very anti-Jets to me. The Jets have very much been Aaron Rodgers is the big headline. Le'Veon Bell's the big free agency signing. Like trying to get the flashy thing and trying to like recoup what was that magic in like the 60s and Joe Namath, and like it just never works. But I feel like this is the okay, we're going to sell the pieces we have who aren't playing as well as they were before, who are name brand players. Sauce Gardner right now, he's deteriorated as far as his play on the field, but to be able to recoup what they did for that, you are selling at a high and you're getting players back at their low. AD Mitchell, getting him back as like just the throw-in piece in this trade that they got him is a really good piece to just be able to be like, he was a second round pick a year ago, but they just threw him in with 2 first round picks. Like to be able to buy low and sell high is a really good thing to be able to do. And they did it. And so got to give the Jets all the credit in the world. I think they came out on the winning end of both of these trades.
I agree. So let's talk about the trades specifically. Sauce Gardner gets dealt to the Colts, which says a lot about, the Colts are like, listen, we have a really good team. Not just because we have a good record, but we have a good team. We've stacked up against some of the better teams in the AFC already. They do have a couple losses. But they beat the Chargers, right? They beat the Broncos. They have wins that show this is not just a fluke based on being in the AFC South. And so we've got a team that's competitive, and they saw a need at corner, and so they trade for Sauce Gardner. The compensation package, I believe it had 2 first round picks, right, Nick?
Two firsts and AD Mitchell.
And AD Mitchell. The weird thing, I don't feel like they overpaid. That said, I also feel like they could have gotten a better deal at the same time. It's like it's weird. And a weird thing just in general about the way that, things work when you're trading guys is if they have, for some guys, if there's a big contract attached to them with a lot of years, that's a good thing because you're getting control of them for longer, and so it means you have to pay more. But also sometimes it's like, oh, that's a bad thing because now you have all this money tied up in this player, so we're going to pay less. And I honestly struggle to see how the balance weighs between the two sometimes. But regardless, the Colts give up that for Sauce Gardner. I think this is a good move for the Colts. To again help shore up their defense, and their defense has been solid this year. But I like this move to get them a corner that is like a corner that opposing offenses need to be scared of.
hmm Definitely. I agree that and the thing is that Kenny Moore's a really good corner and he's been around the Colts for a number of years, but he's just a different body type. He's a smaller nickel kind of corner. He's better than your normal nickels in the league because he can do a little bit of everything. But Kenny Moore, I think, complements Sauce Gardner really well, where you're going to be able to deploy them in different matchups in a really good way. And for
Hmm.
Lou Anarumo, I think it's clearly the best corner that he's ever had between his time this year with the Colts and then with the Bengals. Like the Bengals never had great corners. Like you're talking about Cam Taylor Britt, Mike Hilton, um, what's his name, who was on Chidobe Awuzie, Eli Apple. Like it's just not good corners normally.
Hmm.
And so to be able to play around with how you want to play coverage and just deploy a dude to hopefully take out a side of the field, that's going to be really useful for a defensive coordinator that wants to do crazy stuff.
Yeah, for sure. The
Mhm.
and again, we talked about the Jets making this move. They get some good draft capital in this move and the next one we'll talk about, which is good because and I mean, I don't want to always compare the Jets to the Lions one under Dan Campbell.
Mhm.
But if you look at what the Lions did once Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes took over, it was a lot of get a lot of stuff out of here that's already here and accumulate what we need to progress forward.
Mhm.
And that looked like players and picks.
Mhm.
So having if you trust your front office, you trust your coaches and your scouts to be able to see what they want, draft what they want, and develop what they want,
Mhm.
then the best thing you can get is draft picks because that makes your team younger, makes your team cheaper, and makes your team much more malleable than
Mhm.
guys that you already have. So
Yeah.
definitely being able to get 2 first round picks is a massive, massive win for the Jets with this deal.
I,
Um,
I just want to point out for a second the Colts end of it. I'm really concerned about the Colts, not this year, but like future prospects, because
mhm.
you traded away your next 2 first round picks, 2026, 2027. Your quarterbacks you have on your roster are Daniel Jones on a 1 year deal and Anthony Richardson. You are in a tenuous position that the Giants found themselves in, where they said, we have Daniel Jones on the last year of his deal, and we have Saquon, and we really don't want to have to franchise Saquon. So let's just pay Daniel Jones a big contract. Then they franchise Saquon. Then Saquon went to the Eagles after that. And that's how the Giants got into their mess. And now Daniel Jones kind of has them by the throat, being like, okay, you have no 1st round pick to be able to draft your quarterback. You have Anthony Richardson, who Daniel Jones has soundly outplayed anything Anthony Richardson's put on tape. And so it's like, I don't understand how the Colts get a good deal in the offseason for a quarterback, whether that's Daniel Jones or someone else.
Yeah,
And they're going to have to pay at minimum 46 million for the franchise tag for Daniel Jones. If not, they're going to have to pay him another multi-year contract like the
yeah,
Giants. And that's just a really scary place to be in when you have a dude like Daniel Jones with his hands on your throat. Like you can't do anything about that if you're the Colts. You just mortgaged the future for a corner and said, "We trust Daniel Jones." And that's just really scary. I'm kind of scared for the Colts' future for them. I'm just worried for them.
yeah. Well, they might also be saying not necessarily that they trust their whole future in Daniel Jones, but that they trust their whole future in Shane Steichen. And
Potentially.
they trust, like, hey, you know what? We can draft a quarterback in the second round, right? There are a lot of quarterbacks that are going to be coming out this year, and
Mhm,
far too many that one should not have first round grades. Though some of them
mhm,
will get drafted in the first round, and two, too many of them for teams that need to draft a quarterback in the first round. That you're going to have. Day two, you're going to have on day two guys that, at one point or another were talked about like, no, these are going to be first round quarterbacks. And
true.
so, yeah, yeah, you're not going to be in a position to draft Fernando Mendoza or Dante Moore, um,
Mhm,
or Ty Simpson if he comes out, though all three of
mhm,
those guys might go back.
mhm,
But you will be in a place that, some of these other guys that
mhm.
are falling off a little bit, but, do
Right.
have potential, right? Like I think enough people Um, and I would hope that the Colts wouldn't make this mistake again. But I think enough people have
Lenore
learned from
Sellers.
Trey Lance, right, from Trey Lance and Anthony Richardson. Hey, no matter what Lenora Sellers looks like when he walks into the room, that doesn't mean that he can play quarterback. But
Mhm,
that said, he might be available round three. There are going to be other quarterbacks there
mhm,
that you might feel comfortable with getting one of those, having him and Anthony Richardson as your quarterbacks, letting Daniel Jones go and get money that he wants, like the Vikings did with Sam Darnold. Only difference is he was option number two behind JJ McCarthy, not option number one
mhm,
going into the year. But
mhm,
still, there's a chance that the Colts are also like, you know what, we think Shane Steichen, look what Shane Steichen has made out of Daniel Jones. We trust that
mhm,
he can make a competent quarterback out of
mhm,
somebody that we give him, not named Anthony Richardson.
mhm,
All right, moving on to trade number two for the Jets. They traded Quinnen Williams to the Cowboys. We've already talked ad nauseum about the Jets. The Jets get
mhm,
picks. They get a first round pick and a second round pick.
mhm,
Great, high value picks that hopefully the Jets don't use these picks to trade up or anything. Hopefully they use them just to draft guys where they are,
mhm,
because again, that's the best way to build up your roster. The
mhm,
Cowboys though trade for Quinnen Williams. This was not the only trade that they did. They also traded for linebacker Logan Wilson from the Bengals, and a lot of people are kind of dogging on the Cowboys for this move. Nick, I
mhm,
see that you've graded this move for the Cowboys as a C plus, and I have a
mhm,
different perspective on it when we look at the Cowboys
mhm,
making this move. While
mhm,
this does not make the Cowboys certainly not a Super Bowl contender, and honestly not really a playoff contender this year, this
mhm,
is a move that gets them someone that can shore up what's been one of their biggest weaknesses for the last, basically since Mike McCarthy took over as head coach, which is stopping the run
mhm,
for the future, right? This is a
mhm,
move that is not just a play for now, it's a play for the future. And I think if we only think about it as a play for the future, it's not as bad of a or it's not as bad of a decision as a lot
mhm,
of people are acting like. I think when they think about it as this was the Cowboys move to make them Super Bowl contenders this year, because Jerry Jones is saying we made moves to make ourselves Super Bowl contenders this year. Forget anything Jerry Jones ever says. If you just
mhm,
look at this for, okay, well, what do the Cowboys look like next year, the year after that? I actually think this made a lot of sense for them, especially
mhm,
pairing it with the move for Logan Wilson to get a true linebacker at
mhm,
linebacker instead of a defensive back at linebacker.
mhm,
Again, this year it's too little too late, but for moving forward, I think these are actually really good moves for the Cowboys.
mhm. I just kind of have concerns with the Cowboys because their process is just so horrendous. That was just evident with the Micah Parsons trade, where it was, we want to sign Micah. Well, we want to get a deal done. Well, let's wait till the end. Oh, well, actually, let's trade him, but we want to keep him. It was just all over the place. And the trade that they did to trade away Micah Parsons, they didn't even hold an auction. They could have just said, we're trading Micah Parsons. Everybody come to the table with their deals. And they could have got crazy assets back. They got 2 first-round picks in Kenny Clark. They could have gotten 2 first-round picks, a second, a third, and a player too. I like you could have gotten some crazy assets back, I think, in this trade. My issue, though, with their process extends from you trade away Micah Parsons because you're saying this defense needs more than just one player on it. Micah Parsons is just one cog in this machine, and the defense wasn't good with him. And they traded away a bunch of assets here with a first and second round pick for one player.
Hmm.
It's not the end of the world type of trade. But the thing is, you traded away a first and second for defensive tackle when you got Kenny Clark in the Micah Parsons trade, and you pay Oso Digazua, who's another defensive tackle, $20 million a year. You have 3 defensive tackles now making $20+ million a year. Unless they're running 3 defensive tackles, 2 edges, I just don't know what you do with that. Like
That's
you're
true.
about to be having a backup defensive tackle being paid $20 million a year. And I guess the writing on the wall then is that Kenny Clark's going to get traded after this year, cut or something.
Yeah.
But if you're cutting him, that's terrible process because he was a slice of the Micah Parsons trade and a big slice at that.
Hmm.
And if you trade him, okay, you trade him for what, a third or a fourth round pick. Why did you ask for Kenny Clark when you could have just got the third round pick if you wanted a variety of players in the original trade? Like
Right.
that just feels like really strange process to me. And I'm just really worried about the Cowboys and how their teams ran. They just are not ran well. I think for the future, it makes sense, like you're saying. But I just don't think that this defensive coordinator, they just haven't been able to keep a defensive coordinator and have a good one for a number of years. I
Mm.
just think for the defensive coordinator that went to Washington, who I'm blanking on his
Dan
name,
Quinn.
coach there, Dan Quinn, like he was good, but then his last game as defensive coordinator for the Cowboys was when they got destroyed by the Packers in the playoffs, and they got annihilated because their defense was just letting dudes run wide open.
Hmm.
And so I'm just really concerned that the Cowboys aren't able to keep defensive coordinators. They don't have the players in place to be able to have this defense play well. I just don't see how this defense plays great. They're playing right now like the one of the worst two defenses in the league, and Quinn Williams might make them play like a bottom five instead of bottom two. But I just don't see the reason to trade away a first and a second for that gap to be filled.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think yeah, it's tough because with the Cowboys, you can never just look at whatever it is just as what it is, right? With the Cowboys, it always has to be all encompassed with everything else. I think again, the move as just this move is not as bad. But sure, if you combine it with everything else, it's not pretty either. Let's briefly touch on a couple of wide receivers that got traded. Rashid Shaheed gets traded by the Saints to the Seahawks, and Jacoby Myers gets traded from the Raiders to the Jaguars. Um, with Jacoby Myers, thank goodness for him. He's been stuck there far too long. And also, I think what this actually says more about when it comes to the Jaguars is that Travis Hunter's knee injury is more severe um, than they're sharing. Um, and hopefully it's not. And hopefully, because of this, when Travis Hunter comes back, they can just focus him on defense instead of so that he can really, really fine tune his skills there. Um, and Rashid Shaheed going to the Seahawks, this combined with the Colts trading for Sauce Gardner, I think if you would have told anyone 3 years ago that there are teams that are going to mortgage their future for what they have with Sam Darnold and Daniel Jones, they would laugh at you. But the fact is, that's where we are in 2025 because Sam Darnold and Daniel Jones are playing like playoff caliber quarterbacks this
Mhm.
year. And so if you look at the Seahawks wide receiver core now, it's pretty scary. You've got Jackson Smith and Jigba, Cooper
Mhm.
Cup, and Rashid Shaheed. That's quite a three-headed monster right there. Nick, any comment on either of these two deals?
I just like Rashid Shaheed giving the Seahawks more flexibility because right now it'll come up later, but Jackson Smith and Jigba's looked incredible. But the thing is, he's also having to carry that receiving core as far as targets and yards. Like he's doing a boatload of the work right now for the Seattle Seahawks receiving core. And to be
Mhm.
able to just say, okay, now if you have your best corner covering Jackson Smith and Jigba, you're going to have a mismatch with Shaheed and his speed against the next corner down. And Sam Darnold, his life should be made easier. I just think to give that flexibility and that wiggle room, because right now, imagine what would happen if Jackson Smith and Jigba went down before this trade. Like you'd be throwing to Torrey Horton and Cooper Cup, but like, man, this offense would not be as explosive as it is now. And it's so explosive right now. They've been playing so incredibly well. And so I
Mhm.
think just the value to give them some wiggle room for Seattle is really good. Jacoby Myers, good for him getting out of the Raiders. He requested a trade earlier this year. I think that it was solid value for both of those players. Jacoby Myers, I wanted the Steelers to trade for him because I think he would have been a good complementary receiver for the Steelers with DK. But I just think that the Jaguars' direction's a little weirder because there were rumblings of could the Jaguars trade Brian Thomas Jr. And I don't know why there were those rumblings, but there were. And with, of course, Travis Hunter being injured. It's just a weird situation that's why I don't feel like it's as clean for the Jaguars with them trading for Myers. But I think Shaheed, it's clean, it's great. A plus to them. I just think that's a great trade. Myers, I think, is a good trade, but I have my concerns.
Yeah. A couple others real quick, some defensive moves. Draymond Jones gets traded to the Ravens from the Titans, and Jalen Phillips gets traded to the Eagles from the Dolphins. The Dolphins are such a mess. Like,
Mm.
if you're going to trade Jalen Phillips, which totally fine, why are you also not trading Bradley Chubb? Why are you also not trading Tyreek Hill? Like, or at
Waddle.
least trying to Waddle. Like, you've got a lot of pieces that are doing nothing for you on a team that's doing nothing right now.
Mhm.
Like, if you Mike McDaniel, when the ownership, the front office needs to come out and specify Mike McDaniel will be the coach for the remainder of the year, that means that at the end of this year he's going to get fired.
Yeah.
Like, so you must really think that these are pieces that whoever comes in next is really going to be excited to have.
Mhm.
An aging Bradley Chubb that hasn't really done much in recent years. A Tyreek Hill that is completely washed and can't stay on the field, whether it's health or off the field issues related. A quarterback in Tua that is just not it. Like, it's sad, but he is just not it. I don't understand why you're not looking more like the Jets, and like, here's our assets. We're giving them up so that we can get picks, so we can move for the future. Just doesn't make sense to me. The Eagles trading for Jalen Phillips. I mean, it's just so Howie Roseman. It's not even funny at this point.
Mhm.
Getting awesome defensive players that then become rotational defensive players because your defensive side of the football is just so loaded is just crazy. Um, the Ravens trading for Draymond Jones tells me that they are not willing to throw in the towel yet on this year.
Mhm.
And I think that's because your Steelers are very chaseable. And that's
Mhm.
because despite beating the Patriots and beating the Colts, they also lost to Cincinnati and are just in this era of the Tomlin era are prone to do that, or to win games that it's like, no, they're contenders, but also lose games that make you go like, or are
Mhm.
they?
Mhm.
And so I think if it weren't like, and I mean, Baltimore started 1-5 and they still are like, no, we can still track them down, right? I think if the Steelers win, you know beat Seattle or beat Cincinnati, they have one more win under their belt, then
Mhm.
maybe Baltimore thinks a little bit longer about, do we
Mhm.
make a move like this. But they trade for Draymond Jones, add defensive help, because shockingly the Ravens issues before Lamar got hurt where their defense couldn't do anything. So
Mhm.
that shores up that side of the ball for them a little bit.
Mhm. I'm there with you. I think that not much else has to be said about the trades individually. I think what you were saying about the Dolphins, like, why are you not having a fire sale, is a really fair point to make. And I agree with that 100%. The Dolphins, I just want to point out the Jets got back massive compensation for trading away two big name players. Who right now on the Dolphins could you trade away and get two first round picks or a first and a second right now? Like Waddle, I don't think you get a first and a second. You get a first and maybe a little something else. Hill, he tore his ACL. He's out for the year. Like, not him. Tua right now is an anchor to that team with how big his contract is. Like, nobody on the defense that I can think of really. Like, I really couldn't tell you who on the Dolphins has that much trade value. And
I
that just,
mean,
to me, it just shows you that the that a competent offense with the Dolphins, like, they can run a competent offense and the Jets can't. And that's why the Jets are having a fire sale, because their offense can't do a damn thing. Their defense has talent. The Dolphins, their defense doesn't have much talent, but their offense is competent. And I think that's the gap. But that doesn't mean that the Dolphins have a bunch of valuable players. They can just run a competent offense because of their head coach and quarterback. But like,
right.
this isn't a very talented team at all. This is a very untalented team, I would say.
Yeah, and I would imagine that they were probably some of the reason that these trades didn't happen is because they were expecting compensation similar to what the Jets got. And, like because Brad Holmes is a really good, GM, I'm sure he called them about Bradley Chubb. He's aware that edge is a position of need for the Lions. And they
Mhm.
probably said, "Yeah, we want a second and a fifth." And he hung up the phone because he's like, "That's you want way too much, right?" And I'm sure that had something to do with it. I don't know, the with how much regression we've seen from Isaiah Pacheco. I could have seen, the Chiefs trying to get Devon Achane maybe.
Mhm. Mhm.
I mean, there's players that need or teams that need help, right? Like, Buffalo could have used Jalen Waddle, right? Now again, it would be much harder to make that trade in division, but still, like
Yeah.
if you are in the position of we are bad, we are going to get worse, we need to rebuild. But that this has been the issue with the Dolphins. We talked so much about how the Cowboys have such a terrible process. The Dolphins have just as bad a process
Yeah.
of they refuse to fully rebuild. They never do it. And because of that, they're always in this cycle of mediocrity. They always get to the point that the best they can do is make the playoffs, but not host a playoff game, lose that
Mhm.
playoff game, and then have all of this money tied up in these players, and then that's it. I mean, it is just a tale as old as time with the Dolphins right now.
Mhm.
Um, and so yeah, I bet they wanted too much, and I bet they weren't. Um, I bet they wanted too much, and they weren't willing to do anything,
Mhm.
that was necessary. So
I do got to give the Dolphins credit, though, at least. They did just mutually part ways with their GM in the last week or two, which is code for, if you haven't been paying attention, firing them. Like Chris Greer, the GM of the Dolphins, was terrible and he deserved all the hate because he was not good and he stuck around way too long. But they at least were able to fire their GM. The Cowboys can't fire their GM. Jerry Jones is their GM. And so they can't get rid of him. And if Jerry Jones could take a step back and they could get rid of him as GM, like the Dolphins just did, I'd give the Cowboys some credit if Jerry Jones stepped back. But he
mhm.
won't because he is Jerry Jones. And so I'll give the Dolphins that semblance of credit, saying at least you knew to throw out the trash.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Let's move on. We've taken about a half hour, so about half our time talking about these trades, and let's move on to talking about our our mid-season awards. If the actually ended right now, who we're giving these awards to? Let's not bury the lead, Nick. Let's just start right at the top with the MVP. Who do you have as the MVP of the NFL so far this year?
My MVP currently would be Matt Stafford. I'm not projecting him to win it at the end of the year, but right now, Matt Stafford, top of line. I think he's the best quarterback as far as quarterback play right now in the NFC. He's got 21 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. That offense, when it's got everybody together, hums, man. Puka Nakua, Devontae Adams, great. They throw the ball a ton, whether it's short, right from the goal line, or deeper. I just think that Matt Stafford right now, he's an interception prone player where he, like even in that NFC championship game that they won, he threw one right to Jaquiski Tart, and Jaquiski Tart just dropped it because Matt Stafford will throw those balls sometimes. He has only 2 interceptions this year, leading the league in touchdown passes, top 5 in yards. I just think that he's playing incredibly well. This is the best ball of Matt Stafford's career, I think. And we're just taking it for granted because he's old Matt Stafford. He's not on a team that we're looking at like they're going to make the Super Bowl like he was when he won the Super Bowl a couple years ago. But I
Mhm.
think this Rams team, even though they don't have the big names like Jalen Ramsey or Aaron Donald anymore, I think that they are in line with some of those teams previously who are just going to be really good. Their defense is talented, their offense is explosive. Matt Stafford right now is playing like the MVP.
I totally agree. He's who I have, like you mentioned, leading the league in touchdowns, only 2 interceptions on the year. He's
Crazy.
currently on pace for 45 touchdowns and
Mm-hmm.
between 4 and 5 picks this year, which
Yep.
is just which is just wild. Like you said, he's playing some of the best ball of his life. I think that teams that recognize they need to do a rebuild but want to do a soft rebuild need to look at the blueprint that the Rams put forth between them winning the Super Bowl when they won it and what they are now, right? They did dip down a little bit, but they drafted well. I mean, you talk about Aaron Donald being gone, and I would be crazy to say that Jared Verse has filled in that role all by himself. But when you're able to draft that well, then like there you go, you know, um, able to utilize what you have, able to make trades when necessary, and also be willing to let guys go when necessary as well. They've done a really great job. That you know, and think about like. Let's see, 3 months ago, even 2 months ago, we were still incredibly concerned about Matthew Stafford and his back that basically held him
Mhm.
out of all of training camp and the preseason. And you know, rest was all he needed, at least through the first half of the year. He looks great. Big showdown in the NFC West this Sunday afternoon with the Rams taking on the 49ers. Um, to hopefully gain a little bit more control for the Rams of their division. So I totally agree with you. I've got him as my MVP as well.
Mhm.
Let's move on to Offensive Player of the Year. Nick, who
Mhm.
do you have right now as your Offensive Player of the Year?
Mhm. There are two guys right now as favorites. Both of them have actually faced my Steelers. Both of them super talented dudes. Staying in the NFC West, Jackson Smith and Jigba. He's clearly far and away playing like the best receiver in football right now, even if he might not literally be the best receiver in football. He's playing like it, and he's clearly a top five receiver in football, like bar none right now, this level that he's elevated to. He's on pace right now to be around where the current record is for yards for a receiver in a year. And with the 17th game, he's on pace to get 2,000 yards as a receiver, which is just insane. He's able to rack up yards against every sort of defense. He's able to just beat his man in all sorts of situations. Him and Sam Darnold, an insane connection. They're on the same page, deep ball, intermediate, short. He's just playing incredibly well. Jonathan Taylor, I think, also has been playing incredibly well. But Jonathan Taylor just kind of got shut down by the Steelers. Not shut down necessarily because they didn't continue trying to run it, but Jonathan Taylor wasn't incredibly effective. They put the ball in Daniel Jones's hands. And so the pace that JT was on has kind of slowed. But I think JSN right now clearly playing superstar stud, all pro, triple crown type dude. So I got to go JSN.
And I got to go with Jonathan Taylor.
Dang,
I've
let's
got Jonathan
go.
Taylor. Here's the thing: we the not we when the last time that Daniel Jones had a great year, the New York Giants belittled how much of that came because of Saquon Barkley. I'm not going to belittle how much of Daniel Jones' success has come from Jonathan Taylor. But before this last week, which again, it was a slower week for him, you know, compared to you know every other game that they had played this year. But um, before this last week, you know, there was a legitimate case to be made of like, should we start talking about Jonathan Taylor the way we were talking about Saquon last year? And that
Mm-hmm.
like, listen, he might actually be the most valuable player in the NFL. It's a quarterback award now, but he might be the most valuable player. There was, you know, that's obviously slowed a little bit with his little bit slower of a week last week, but if you want to talk about both statistically and impact on the offense for the team that he's on, I don't. I think you have to give Jonathan Taylor the credit and the flowers there. He's leading the league in rushing. He's
Mm-hmm.
leading the league in touchdowns, and
Mm-hmm.
he's second in the league in carries, which means that his average is not great compared to a lot of guys in the league, but it's because they are relying on him that much.
Mm-hmm.
And they're relying on him because they can rely on him, and he's showing by getting all those yards, by scoring all those touchdowns, like, hey, you can put the ball in my hand. He is on pace for 21 rushing touchdowns this year. He is
Mm-hmm.
on pace for almost for like 1700 1800 yards this year.
Mm-hmm.
Those are, you know, don't
Mhm.
sleep on that because Saquon broke 2,000 last year. So right now I would give it to Jonathan Taylor, because
Mhm.
while I hear everything you say and I agree with
Mhm.
everything that you said about Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think that there is a world that the Seahawks offense, while it wouldn't be as good and as effective, could still be good and effective without him. And I don't know that the Colts offense would be that without Jonathan Taylor, as we saw on Sunday when they had to throw the ball more than they could run it, and we saw what the Colts offense looked like.
Mhm. Definitely. I got no issue with it. I think those were the two dudes, and we split, and that's completely okay.
Yep. All right. Defensive player of the year. Nick, who do you have as your defensive player of the year right now?
This one I had to think about for a hot second. I'm going to go with Myles Garrett. I just think that he just had a signature game in the last 2 weeks, 5 sacks against the Patriots. Their offensive lines played much better, and still Myles Garrett just tore it to shreds. He's just playing like a one-man wrecking crew for an incredible Cleveland Browns defense. Their defense, I think, is that high level because Myles Garrett is playing up to his potential and putting up just a ridiculous season where it's not just the pressures and the win rate. He's stacking up sacks, plays, just incredible plays all around.
Hmm.
I will say, though, that I did watch an entire game of Aiden Hutchinson versus the Vikings this last week. I watched every single snap of that whole game, and I was like, wow, Aiden Hutchinson is clearly a top 2 to 3 edge rusher right now in the league. I was like, whoa. He probably flashed on my screen, was in the backfield probably 20 or 30 times. Like it was just ridiculous. On a
Hmm.
snap per snap basis, he was putting up some crazy plays and against good offensive tackles too. Darisaw and O'Neal are really good offensive tackles. So I think it's close. Hutchinson's playing really well too. But I think Myles Garrett is just a one-man wrecking crew, the name brand value on a much higher end defense than Hutchinson right now, even though the wins are going to be a big separator. I just
Hmm.
think that the Cleveland Browns defense are a staple, and Myles Garrett right now is deserving of the level he's playing at and getting that award.
Yeah. And I mean, the defensive player of the year award, like, pretty much always comes down to, like, I mean, not exactly who wins the sack crown, but who's up there,
Mhm.
because the Browns defense as a unit is so much better.
Yeah.
Offenses cannot give Myles Garrett the same treatment that offenses give Aiden Hutchinson.
Mhm.
And so because of that, Hutch only has 7 sacks compared to 10. He only has 10 tackles for loss. Or sorry, he only has 7 tackles for loss compared to 15 for Myles Garrett.
Mhm.
So I agree. I also have Myles Garrett, though I do think I want to give Brian Burns some credit. He currently has the most sacks in the NFL at 11. He has 14
Mhm.
tackles for loss. He has 5 passes deflected, and 2 forced fumbles. So he is also, I mean, he's having a really, really solid year as
Mhm.
well. In the end, though, I do think that if I had a ballot and had to vote today, I'm voting for Myles Garrett.
Mhm. I'd agree there.
Cool. Offensive rookie of the year, Nick.
I
Who
was
do you have?
Man, I was telling you before we started recording, man. I don't love this with where we're at in the season because there are a bunch of dudes who have all played well for stretches who are rookies, but none of them have put up that resume type of first half of the season. I'm just going to stick with the Mecca Ibuka. I just think that he was playing so incredibly well early in the season, and he hasn't fallen off completely. Injuries have kind of slowed him down, and I think the Bucks have kind of taken a step back and are less of an explosive offense. But he has such high heights right now as far as the offensive rookies, and he's playing on a really good team, and he has the
Mhm.
highlight plays and just overall, I think that he's looked that good and played at the highest end of all the offensive rookies. I just think that not much else has to be said. Not all the resumes look great, but his I think is the greatest resume right now. I'll go with the Mecca Ibuka.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think right now he's probably the pick. Um, I would argue that, like, I refuse to give it to Jackson Dart right now. because if we give it to him, we are overly valuing the win against the Eagles, in which I think he completed like around 50% of his passes. So we're overvaluing that and overvaluing the quarterback position, right? So for those two reasons, right now I refuse to give it to Jackson Dart. So yeah, I think that Ibuka is the way to go. I think that there is a rookie for the Los Angeles Chargers that we should not be sleeping on right now as a guy who is trending in the right direction. That is not first round pick Omarion Hampton. That is fifth round pick Oronde Gadsden. Syracuse alum. In his last 4 games, the lowest number of yards he's had is 68. He's had 8 targets, 9 targets, 5 targets, 5 targets. Both of those 5 target games, he caught every pass. The Chargers are genuinely using him. Which as a Syracuse fan is really cool to see him have that NFL success. But even reading a couple articles, about like offensive rookie of the year, what are the current odds right now? A few of them said like where to place your bet right now for value is on Oronde Gadsden because he's currently at like plus 2,500, but he is trending in the right direction. So
Mhm.
anyway, that's my little Syracuse plug for for this week's episode. But I agree, Emeka Ibuka. But yeah, don't sleep on how far up the boards OG might crawl towards the end of the season. Moving on to defensive rookie of the year, Nick. Who is your defensive rookie of the year right now?
I'm just going to go chalk. Beginning of the season, I think it was clear Abdul Carter's kind of separated himself from the rest of the pack before any snap was played. And I don't think there's anything in the season that would have changed that pick from me. Brian Burns obviously has put up the crazy stats, but I think Abdul Carter is on pace right now to, in his career, he's going to get to higher heights than Brian Burns. I just think that Abdul Carter's done nothing to show that he wasn't deserving of that pick, and he's played incredibly well, gotten pressure against some really good tackles. And I think that just the lack of other dudes who I would really say are up at that high end is why I would go Abdul Carter. The competition's just not incredibly great this year for defensive rookie of the year, and Carter's really good anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I I sort of feel like none of these guys have really like set a tone, like oh man, like obviously, it's rare to have a rookie have like a Chase Young rookie year, but still, we haven't seen anyone that, has done anything like that. A guy that I am still sort of seeing and keeping an eye on that I think could make some noise here in this that is not Abdul Carter is Will Johnson. Um,
Yep.
he's played really well this year. He was one that didn't run a 40-yard dash, and because of that, went from being potentially a top 10 pick to falling all the way into the second round. When
Mm-hmm.
we were doing our first round pick live or our first round live stream, we were joking who's going to fall farther, Will Johnson or Shador Sanders. It ended up being Shador Sanders.
By a lot.
Um, yeah, by a lot. But he's had a really really solid year. 19 tackles, a forced fumble, no sacks, six passes defended. Like he's playing really well. He's another guy on that defense that especially in the back defensive backfield that is and I said this a couple weeks ago that the Cardinals are a much better team than their record shows because they've lost a lot of close games, and defenses are what keep you in close games a lot of the time, and so the Cardinals defense has been pretty good, and he's certainly made a name for himself on that side of the ball.
Mhm.
All right, comeback player of the year, Nick. Who do you have right now as your comeback player of the year?
Man, I gave Hutch some flowers earlier. I thought about him for this. I'm gonna go with Dak Prescott. Even though they're not putting up a ton of wins, they're playing. I historically have been a Dak hater where I'm just like, I don't know that he's a top 10 quarterback. He's not playing like that. But Dak Prescott right now, I think, has elevated in terms of his mobility. He's way more mobile than even before the injury. Like he's over 30 now. but his legs, his arm, his ability to push the ball downfield, make good decisions. Like Dak Prescott right now, I think is playing at a top 5 quarterback level, given the injuries and everything. Like I think he's right up there with Mahomes, Allen, Stafford. Like I think Dak's playing up at that level. Lamar obviously plays at an incredibly high level as well and probably above Dak on the average. But Dak Prescott right now, I think, is playing so incredibly well that it just kind of elevated him above with the quarterback value above Hutchinson. I think Hutchinson's playing incredibly well too. But a top 5 edge rusher versus a top 5 quarterback right now, as far as play, I'm just going to give the value to a quarterback. Both of them, though, very, very impressive. If there was an offensive comeback player of the year and a defensive one, I'd want to give it to both of them clearly, and like that would be awesome. But right now, Dak, like he's just kind of opened my eyes where I'm like, man, I need to give Dak more respect. He's looked great though.
Yeah, I think Dak has been phenomenal. I am gonna go and lean with Aiden Hutchinson here.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of it, and I don't think that this should have anything to do with it, but we've seen in the past that this part of like this the narrative part of it in terms of what it is that they came back from is important. And the level that Hutch was playing at last year that got totally halted by such a gruesome injury,
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to not just come back from that but come back from that and play at just as elite of a level. Yes, he doesn't have as many sacks as he did last year when around that time, but still, like, to still be then a top 3 edge rusher after that. We've seen in the past, like Alex Smith came back from his experience where he nearly lost his leg,
Mm-hmm.
and that was really impressive. It's not like he came back and was the same guy, and played super well, right? Of course, there have been other examples too of that. But to be be a defensive player of the year contender, have
Mm-hmm.
your leg completely snapped in half, within a year come back and be a defensive player of the year level player
Mm-hmm.
again. I just think is crazy impressive. And also he is leading the league right now with 4 forced fumbles as well. He's not just getting back there and sacking quarterbacks, he's stripping them too, which is something that's unique. Though, again, if you went with Dak, I wouldn't be like Hutch got robbed.
Mm-hmm.
So
It's
yeah. All
close.
right.
It's clearly
Yeah.
close.
Last one. Coach of the year. Nick, who is your coach of the year right now?
Funny enough, I feel like it's between two coaches for two teams that the two dudes faced off in another award that we split on. And it wouldn't surprise me if we split on this coach of the year too. I'm going to go with Shane Steichen here with the Colts. And I wouldn't be opposed to anybody going with the other dude who I think you might bring up here. But I think Shane Steichen and his ability to elevate this Colts team and just be able to produce great offense with Daniel Jones, I think is so impressive. And I think that I'm looking at him compared to this other coach that I'll leave it to you. But he's doing it with, in my opinion, a better quarterback who in a number of ways is more established, I think. And so I got to give them credit for the level that the Colts are playing at. The culture, the schemes, the leadership. I just think that everything around the Colts right now is really good vibes. And I got to give Shane Steichen so much credit, though. I think he's an incredible coach who his ability to just say, I have a player who's incredible in like a Tyler Warren. I know every way to get him the ball. Jonathan Taylor, I have an incredible running back. I know every sort of way to get him the ball and does. Bunch of receivers. He knows how to scheme them wide open. And so I got to give Steichen so much credit. He's just masterful at that. And I think a really underrated offensive coordinator. I think he's clearly a top 3 to 5 OC in the league as a head coach. And I think we need to discuss him as such in the Shanahan, McVay, like up in that area. Maybe a half a step down, but he's in that neighborhood, I think. Steichen's got to get a ton of credit there.
Yeah, Shane Steichen absolutely deserves a ton of credit. He's not who I'm going with, um,
Mm,
because the guy that I'm going with, I feel like he had at least from last year to this year, a much tougher hill to climb than Shane
Mm.
Steichen, and that is Mike Vrabel. Um,
Oh, that's a good one.
Mike Vrabel, let's just think about the Patriots for the last 5 years or so, basically post Brady. Post Brady, they made the playoffs as a wild card one time with Mac Jones. Since then, they have literally they have either been the bottom feeder of the AFC East, or they've been fighting with the Jets about being the bottom feeder, but the Jets have had hype around them with having guys like Aaron Rodgers, Sauce Gardner, that has meant even though the Patriots and them are like neck and neck for who's the worst, the Jets are more fun, more exciting. The Jets are getting nationally televised games. The Patriots aren't. Patriots finally move on from Bill Belichick, and last year they get Gerard Mayo. Literally every single thing that we heard from that locker room was that it was a disaster. I mean, we think that the Dolphins are a disaster right now. Mike McDaniel has at least gotten them to playoff games and has had them win games and has gotten them in places where they're like, you know, kind of relevant.
Mhm.
Like this none of that. It was
Mhm.
awful. It was terrible. I think we all sort of agreed that the reason the Patriots wrote into Gerard Mayo's contract that you're going to succeed Bill Belichick is because if they had known that Mike Vrabel was going to be available, they never would have done that,
Yep.
and he would have been the first call. So all of that nastiness, all of that stench, all of that just bad. He comes into that and immediately turns it around. He immediately makes Drake May look like he's solidified top 10 quarterback in the league right now. Some people are trying to, I know some Patriots fans are trying to argue he's top five. I'm not going that far yet.
Mhm.
He has certainly has such a massive career in front of him that it would not surprise me if he gets to that point. But wouldn't call him that yet. But still, you have Drake May looking phenomenal.
Mhm.
You have the defense looking like genuinely genuinely capable of playing defense for the first time, which was weird, first time since Brady left because well, he didn't even play defense, but seriously, that's how it feels. And the as opposed to Steichen, who has been there for a few years and has sort of had this gradual climb, that
Mhm.
this was sort of the next progression. It's a significant progression, but it was kind of the next progression. You're done with Anthony Richardson, get somebody else and take this step up. Vrabel came into a dumpster fire and has turned it into one of the top teams in the AFC this year.
Mhm.
And he deserves all the credit for that. He deserves the credit for getting the Patriots back to being the Patriots. He deserves the credit for getting this team more than just competitive, but actually being a really a really great complete football team. Despite when you look at the roster, like Drake May jumps off the page.
Mhm.
Will Campbell jumps off the page. Christian Gonzalez jumps off the page. But
Mhm.
we're not looking. It's not Brady with Randy Moss and Wes
No,
Welker, right?
no.
It's Stephon Diggs who is having a baby and tore his ACL last year and is on like his eighth team.
Mhm.
Continuing to convince us that he's on his revenge tour when it's like, my guy, you can't be on a revenge tour every single year. Um, so I can't ignore what Mike Vrabel has done, especially because it was just so bad.
Mhm.
It was just so bad. Um, the fact that he took a team that had the fourth overall pick last year and
Mhm.
turned them into a team that might dethrone Josh Allen and the Bills as the AFC East champion is shocking in a good way. So I gotta give Mike Vrabel the flowers.
That's a great one. I didn't even think about him. There, the two dudes that popped off the page to me were Steichen and then Mike McDonald in Seattle,
Yeah.
who I want to give a bunch of credit. Mike McDonald's been incredible. That defense, I don't even think the defense is super talented, but they just have a ton of dudes who are playing really well. Really impressive by him. Vrabel's a great pick. My issue with the Patriots is that schedule they've played is just so weak. They beat the Bills, and that's a really good win. And then let me read off to you their other wins. They lost in week one first to the Raiders, and then they beat the Dolphins by 6 points, then lost to the Steelers by 7, and then beat the Panthers, and then beat the Bills by 3. That's a really good win. Then beat the Saints by 6, and then beat the Titans soundly, then beat the Browns soundly, and then had a really close win against the Falcons. Like, it's the Bills, that's a good win. The Falcons really close, and the Falcons, you never know what you're going to get. And then a bunch of garbage. Like, it's just a bunch of garbage teams they've kind of filled up their record on, I feel like. I still got to give
I would
Vrabel
give
a ton of
validity.
credit for
Yeah,
winning those games, because a bunch of those games, like, to be a good head coach is to win the 50-50s. But man, like, it's a lot of garbage that's inflating the record, I think. Like, they might be a 5-win team right now or a 6-win team, but the garbage opponents they've been playing have just kind of made it look great when it's really good.
I am willing to give validity to their throttling of the Panthers as a good win and not call it garbage. The Panthers are 5-4. Can you believe that? The Panthers are five and
It's hard to
four,
believe that.
right? They just beat the Packers at Lambeau this last week. They beat the Cowboys. They've beaten the Dolphins. They destroyed the Falcons, right? Like, are they a team that are going to get into the playoffs? Absolutely not. But beating them 42-13, I'm willing to give validity to
It's a
that
solid
to
win.
to
But the
that win.
Panthers are another team that you just never know what you're going to get. In their
Right.
wins, they play well, but in their losses, they play terribly. They play
Yeah.
awfully in their losses. So I just feel like the Patriots, like, they played against the Steelers team that's a well coached Steelers team, and they got out coached in that spot. Mike Tomlin said, "You're going to be able to punch the ball out against this offense." And then they did it five
Yeah.
times. And
Yeah.
I think that's coaching. And I think that's a tough team that didn't let them just have their way. And so I just
Hmm.
feel like that those are kind of those moments, I feel like, when you don't have a team that's all the way up and down or just down. But
Right.
Patriots deserve a lot of credit. You're right about that.
Yeah, and you know what I would say? They have not lost a game since that Steelers game.
Yeah.
So
True.
the lessons that they learned in that loss to the Steelers, they have they have learned from them and learned from them very well because they're on a 6-game winning streak. 6 game? Yeah, they're on a 6-game winning streak.
Yeah.
So this Sunday they play Tampa Bay in Tampa. So
That's a fun game.
that'll
That'll
be a
be
really awesome measuring stick game for them. After that, yeah, I mean they still play the Jets twice. They play the Dolphins again. They play the Bengals. They play the Ravens in Baltimore towards the end of the season. That could be a game that's like, well, you just need to win this. That could be a game that's like okay, that's a really solid win.
yeah.
We've yet to be seen what the Ravens will look like at that point. They play the Giants and they play the Bengals.
A lot of
But they
trash.
do have, what was
Again,
that?
a lot of bad teams there too. Bengals
But
2 games against the Jets when the Jets just sold 2 of their best defensive players. Like, they're going to be able to fill up this record even more, and they got 7 wins already. That's what's
yeah,
crazy. It's got a whole boatload of them, and they're going to be able to stack up more.
yeah. I think if they win 2 of these 3 games I'm about to mention, then I would be very comfortable calling them like legit. Like, doesn't matter that they have really, really easy wins on their roster. They're legit Super Bowl contenders.
Mm,
Those are Tampa Bay, Buffalo, and Baltimore on the road in
mhm,
December. If you
mhm.
win 2 of those 3 games, then I'm like, okay, you played cupcakes because you were a bad team last year, but you you showed up against these good teams that
Yeah.
has outweighed that in my book.
Mhm,
So interesting to see what the Patriots will look like. Really interesting game this week at 1 p.m. That's New England at Tampa Bay. All
mhm,
right, Nick, we've gone a little long, but it's sort of at a great halfway point to the NFL season.
mhm.
We're nearing the end of the college football season. The College Football Playoff Committee just put out their first round of rankings. Next week, we need to make sure we talk college football a little bit because it's getting interesting.
Mhm.
But yeah, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in as we have discussed trade deadline and our halfway point awards for the year. Enjoy the games this week, and we will see you next time. Have a good one, y'all.